Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Critical Podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Good, and joining me, as always, is my go-to podcast compadre, Mr. Joe Lever, from a remote location. Joe, how are you doing?
We're sight unseen here, Jimmy, where things seem to be getting hostile. I think I may retreat any moment. What's the weather like out there, Ollie? It called rain. No, coming from a remote location, unusual for the podcast. Podcasting from work, everyone. But happy to be here, Jimmy. Another podcast on the run here. Let's do her.
Yeah, well, Joe showing his commitment to the craft. Even he's working late, and then he wanted a podcast. So we appreciate it. I appreciate it. And today here, we're going to talk about just one thing. Not going to be a super long show. We're going to talk about another Star Wars movie. Now, we've talked about the original trilogy. We talked about the prequel trilogy. And eventually, we're going to get into the sequel trilogy. But we wanted to wait for Levi to do that. So this week, we're going to start diving a little bit more into the offshot stuff with Solo, a Star Wars story. Now, if anybody has been following the channel for a while, you'll know that I reviewed it a long time ago. It's one of the intros to a review that I'm most proud of. I made it up on the night. You can see I look crazy. But I still enjoyed this film, and it was kind of fun to come back to it again. Kind of a brief synopsis for people who haven't seen it, potentially. It's on Netflix right now. I'm sure it's coming to Disney+. I was surprised it wasn't on there. I don't think it is, at least at the time of this recording. But just an origin story for Han Solo, which is kind of an interesting choice when you think about all the varied characters that Star Wars has, but that's what they wanted to do. So, yeah, I want to get over to it, especially with Joe here, who actually watched it recently. Now, Joe, for you, we were kind of talking about this right before we started. I think the biggest kind of caveat to Solo is kind of saying, do you buy Ansel Adams, I believe that's his name, to be Harrison Ford's, Han Solo? Is this the same guy to you, more or less, or do you feel like it's not quite there?
That's what makes it tough to do this. For that matter, do you buy that? I forget his name. Is Lando Calrissian? Maybe a little bit more because I don't know. That one's tough too. The age gap I feel like is there, but not quite significant enough.
Sure.
So I don't quite buy it, but for the sake of the movie, I suspend a bit of disbelief, I suppose. So yeah.
Did you like his performance? I think is the main question, because it's like his story.
Yeah, for the most part. I think it's tough. It's tough to judge it, but I did pick up on little mannerisms or ways he did things that remind you of the original Han Solo character in the original 3 prequels, but
the trilogy.
The trilogy. Yeah,
it's hard to keep it all straight. Minor correction right off the bat for me: Alden Ehrenreich. Ehrenreich. That's his name. I don't know Ansel Adams. That's a completely different person. I'm sorry, Alden. Forgive me. I will say this,
what a name.
The hair. I feel like they got the hair as close as you could, because that hair is so interesting. It's like wavy up front, kind of like flayed out in the back. Like, I give him credit for that kind of thing. And this movie, I keep forgetting this, Joe. Like when we went back to it, I forget how much is in this movie. There's like a lot of stuff in here that I wouldn't expect for an origin story, just because like they do a lot of planet hopping. There's a lot kind of told, and there's a lot going on as far as like multiple heists in here. You got to put like Solo story in there. Solo has to meet Chewbacca. He has to meet the rest of that crew, all this stuff, and kind of based upon this love story too, with Emilia Clarke playing Qi'ra. Yeah. What did you think of her? Did you like her in this at all?
I think she's a strong point, mainly because she's a character you're not familiar to from anything else, right? She's new. Of course, at the time, everybody's thinking of Game of Thrones every time they see her face, but I appreciated her in this role. It was interesting. Not the true through and through focal point, but I think a good addition. And their relationship, I think, is well played, beginning and end.
Yeah. I remember coming out of this movie and thinking, I almost like this relationship more. It's going to be blasphemous. A little more in some regards to that of Leia and Han, just because I thought Qi'ra was a little more interesting because she had that complexity of saying like, oh yeah, she has this kind of love story in this past with him, but also she's had to do a lot of really horrible things, and maybe she's not exactly who she seems later on. And there's always kind of the threat that she's going to be like a true bad guy, but she isn't necessarily, but she's not afraid to get her hands dirty too. I don't know. I thought she was really capable and fun, and I really like her a lot. So I was like, okay, I like Kira. I think she's cool. I think she's interesting, and I liked the relationship they had. And I kind of feel bad because I think Alden's performance is great, but I almost kind of wish they would have just given a new name. Like nobody probably would have seen it then, but like Rogue One, where it's like a bunch of new faces, new names. It would have been cool to have just like some new smuggler have this story, and then you could have had, you know, sequel or trilogy kind of thing based around this guy, because I think his adventures could continue in a fascinating way, or Kira's adventures could continue in a fascinating way. I think they could still go back to that, which I would be totally fine with. I guess my other question is, as someone, as they self-proclaimed, not a huge Chewbacca fan, how did you find him in this one? He probably gets his longest speech in any of the films when he talks about why he's doing what he's doing or what he's going to do with the cash after, like, they're talking about the first train job. What did you think of Chewie in this one?
I didn't mind him totally. You know, the whole like finding his clan and family or whatever, or brethren, whatever you want to call it. A little odd and all, but you know, they do justice to the ape-like behavior almost at certain points. But was he truly eating people down in that pit?
He might have been, but he also ripped some guy's arms clean off, and that's been something they've talked about Wookiees doing for a long time, and it was nice to see it, even though it was kind of off camera.
Yeah, sure, a little graphic, right?
Yeah, but, like that guy bled out. He was been screaming, like, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Overall, I mean, had the roars and all that, but it wasn't like Return to the Jedi, where it's just constant. What's wrong with this thing? Does he have a thorn in his foot, for crying out loud?
I like how his introduction, he's all muddy, and all I can think about is the guy in the suit in the mud, and like that whole planet is just mud, and like how disgusting that is. Like
he's just like, get me out of here. That guy's probably, he's got chafing where chafing shouldn't be a thing.
Well, yeah, and like I like that afterwards you get to finally see Chewie, like they're kind of, he and Han are sitting at the base of the ship, and they're like, his hair is flowing, and you're like, oh, Chewie's looking kind of gorgeous now, because like he's had a shower with Han, which I thought was like a funny little maybe 5-second scene they didn't need, but he's just kind of like showering together. Yeah, I was like, oh, that was a funny little, there's a lot of fun little moments, I think, in this film that I think people take for granted.
Sure.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed it. And I think one of the kind of the main reasons to watch this is for Woody Harrelson, who plays Tobias Beckett, kind of the main kind of smuggler, but gunslinger, this thief, this crook, but also I think kind of an interesting, compelling guy. I really enjoyed his performance, but I kind of always do. I think he's such a great character, or just a great actor in general.
It's a good role for Woody Harrelson. He fits that well. And just overall, I mean, I don't think there's been much that I haven't liked Woody Harrelson in. And he chooses, you know, maybe it's him, maybe it's not, but I mean, he chooses well-fitting roles for himself more often than not. But
was he your favorite
I appreciated
character?
Him. Yeah, I liked him a lot.
Yeah, I think
I liked him a lot.
Yeah,
he's compelling in the way that you don't always kind of understand that slyness in him, and it's not always the whole truth, and the way he, spoiler alert, double crosses him in the end, that kind of thing. I appreciate it. And the way it ends with him.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I like it because like you feel like he's a mentor, father figure, obviously, to Han, but then at the very end, it's kind of like the final lesson, and that's like that Han finally just kind of, he shot first, right? And that he kind of is holding his arms. He's like, it's good that you did this, kid. He's like, because this time I really was gonna kill you. So you kind of have it's like unfortunate because you feel like, oh, they could work together, and they're kind of building a crew, and they've kind of gone through ups and downs together, but I think he was great, and I wish there was more of him. It's one of those characters where you're like, oh, he's so cool, and then it's just like, and it's like, oh, he's also has like the cool ability, which I think is more for show, to just kind of like spin his guns around and shoot people. And Lahan's like, teach me that. And he's like, no, you don't need to worry about that. Like, this is kind of I'm the kind of like the gunslinger. I can spin my guns around.
My role.
Yeah, which I really also want to shout out to Tandy Newton, who plays his kind of girlfriend, love interest, partner in crime, as it were, who I think is Val or something like that, who you don't get enough screen time with her. She's in Westworld as well. She's very, very talented. I like her a lot. And I was like, oh, it's just so like sad, and you can like feel it even though you don't know her super well early on when she kind of self-sacrifices to like get the job done. It's like, oh man, like you can tell Beckett, like he doesn't care about a lot in this world, but like maybe she was something that he cared about, or someone I should say. And I like the rest of that crew. I forget the name of the little pilot guy. I have it right here, don't worry about it, Joe. His name is you know which guy I'm talking about? The four-armed guy?
Oh, yeah, the ape.
Rio Durant,
Rio.
who was voiced by the one and only Jon Favreau, which is pretty cool. It's like that guy is just everywhere. But yeah, there's another one that they just kind of introduced and kind of goes away pretty quickly. But yeah, I like that mission too. There's kind of two main heists in this film. I think the train heist is really interesting and dynamic. What did you think about it, Joe? It's kind of unlike most of the stuff you have seen in Star Wars up until this point, unless I'm kind of missing something.
Kind of continues along the theme of Wild West Bandits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. It's intense enough, and you know, the involvement of like the Imperials. I like that. I think it's good. I guess Imperials before they were Imperial.
No, they're Imperials by this point because they've taken over. And Corellia, when they're kind of speeding around in the beginning, you can see like the Star Destroyers getting built, the TIE Fighters are getting built, like all that stuff. That's where it's made, and that's kind of cool to see.
Yeah, where does this movie fit in the timeline again?
It's right before Episode 4, A New Hope, basically.
Okay, yeah, so it's like the OG. Yeah, it makes sense because Han is his youngness. Yeah, I don't know, the whole train heist and everything. It's intense. I like the concept and everything, and then the involvement of the pirates.
All the Marauders, yeah.
The Marauders, or at the time thought to be Marauders. Very cool, very cool. I'm not sure what more to say about it.
I'll tell you what to say about it. That coaxium explosion that happens, I love it. It like blows up, and you can see like there's like the moisture on the edge of it, like the snow, and then it kind of implodes and takes out the mountain. It's like, oh, that was
very
cool.
well done.
I'm like,
Quality
guys,
was off the charts.
It's probably a fuel problem. Like you wouldn't want to use fuel for your bombs, but at the same time, there's part of me thinking like, I wonder if coaxium, the stuff we stole in Smuggler's Run, Joe. I wonder if there's any way you could weaponize that in a more powerful way. It's probably part of the Death Star or something like that. They're like, well, it needs coaxium to also power to the kyber crystals that blow up stuff. But I was kind of thinking about that when I was watching it too. I was like, oh, I like that explosion a lot. And then we kind of move on. You know, you briefly mentioned it because we're kind of talking about characters in the train heist moving down the line here. But moving on to Lando, and then his robot. So we've got Donald Glover playing him, which I think at certain moments he captures the Billy D. Williams super well, like the voice and everything seems like it's there. But then I feel it's hard because both him and Alden kind of like you put him into this role and you kind of say, well, like you got to kind of do this, like you show him the movies, like you got to do this. And I wish he could have had like his own chance to be his own character, because you could kind of feel sometimes that like he's gonna go in a different direction a little bit with it, but they're like, nope, you're Lando. Like it's like, no, you're Lando. Did you get that at all, or did you feel conversely?
I guess maybe I didn't pick up on that minute detail that you're speaking of. I liked him in this role. I think for the most part he kind of plays it accurately.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't pick up on those little nuances where it seemed to depart but come back. I like all his quips and everything, the personalities there, the way he plays the card game, all fitting. His interactions with Han, I can appreciate. It sets up as to why they're kind of friends, but not really friends, or they know each other, right?
Yeah, they're frenemies. you know, at the
Yeah.
very best, and like calling him Han, like right there, and he's like, "It's
Yeah,
Han."
exactly.
Like,
I like that, and he doesn't give up on it.
yeah, I wonder if too, because of like putting that Sabacc game in the middle of the movie, and a lot of people know that, like, you know, the Millennium Falcon was won over a game of Sabacc. I wonder if that was kind of the bait and switch to be like, oh, this is the game, but it's not. And so it felt kind of, I don't know, it makes Lando out to be kind of worse in a lot of ways, because you're like, oh, he is just like a straight up cheater, like, you know, like you get it, you're like, and then they kind of save that for the very end of the movie, which is fine, I think. So kind of Han gets to fly off into the sunset with Chewie, in a sense, into the star set. But
Sure.
that kind of that game early on, I'm like, okay, I guess I don't, it didn't seem like a waste of time. It was a cool scene. I just don't know why, like, we need to do it twice.
Well,
You know what
I
I'm
think it
saying?
was a good setup to the final card game where he wins the ship. I think it was a good setup. You know, you kind of get the little show off of his wrist cheat. You know,
Sure.
so I think it was a good setup all in all for
All I'm
that final
saying,
segment.
if they should have cut that scene, and then they should have put Darth Vader in that first battle sequence where Han is like a stormtrooper out on the front lines. I remember being in the theaters and thinking, if there's any time they're going to put Vader in this movie, he's going to be on the front lines. You just going to see even if they would have shown a red lightsaber in the distance, like hacking people down, I would have been out of my seat, jumping around, like, there he is. He's on the front lines. Like that. I was hoping so badly for that, and we never got it. But that's okay.
Yeah.
But speaking about the Millennium Falcon, going back to that, the Kessel Run, which is all sorts of nuts, because they kind of, it's always been like an on-running joke in the, you know, in the movies. He's like, yeah, I did it in 12 parsecs and all that stuff. It's not so much even like the distance and all of that, or the speed. It's like, all right, so you have to navigate this maelstrom, but there's a giant Cthulhu-like monster in there, but there's also a black hole in there too. Like, it seems like it escalates. There's almost like too much, and like they needed to put the creepy monster in there to show that like the black hole was scary and dangerous, even though that monster had been living near it for a while somehow.
Yeah, which I almost don't understand. Like a space creature floating in space, how?
Yeah, and let's just say it could live there. Let's just say it could live in the atmosphere of Kessel. But anyway, what did you think of the Kessel Run altogether? Did you like it? Was it? I think there's
Yeah, it
still
was
some.
cool. It was
Yeah,
intense, and I love the TIE fighters chasing them and everything.
yeah, and they get messed up. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. No, I really appreciated it, and I was wondering, like, how is this big monster just floating out here?
Yeah.
but yeah, then the gravity of the situation, how it gets, you know, it's still trying to reach for them and get them, but it, you know, in its haste to try and catch them as a meal, it got sucked into the black hole, and it's cool to watch its skin just peel back off the bone and get sucked in. That was neat. I thought it was a really cool effect.
Yeah. To be honest, the first time I saw it, remember thinking like, oh, I didn't realize that the Kessel, he should be talking about that. He shouldn't be talking about how like quickly he did this. He should be talking about the fact that he's like, yeah, I outran like a crazy monster and a black hole at the same time, and the Empire. Like, that's something I would brag about, because like they show the Star Destroyer sitting in like the tunnel. I don't know if it's at the entrance or actually in it, but I was like, oh man, there's no way that thing's getting, like, it's not gonna start floating through that little kind of safety passageway. And they just start sending TIE fighters after him. I was like, okay, fair enough. But
yeah, they're not going to waste some TIE fighters on a, you know, random cargo ship.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I I don't know. I like the Kessel Run though. It sounds like you do too, which is good, because it's one of those things that it's kind of like it's probably the biggest like moment of the film, wouldn't you say?
That, and when they actually go to steal the Coaxium.
Yes, which I was gonna say we should talk about that for a second. What did you think about that whole, like, the kind of the droid liberation scene, and then the slave liberation, and the kind of fight that came after it?
I hated that freaking droid, man.
Yeah, L337.
Yeah. Oh god. I finally found my purpose. To freedom, my comrades, follow me. I'm just like, shut up.
Well, even like Lando's kind of
over making this better.
Yeah. So you weren't a huge fan of that.
Yeah, although he risks his life to go back and get the remnants of the darn bucket of bolts.
But then she's the one who kind of navigates them through the rest of that, like the maelstrom and stuff.
Well, there's value in it because of the maps that she held and everything. Or it held.
Which, if you recall, back in good old episode 4, A New Hope, I think C-3PO says like, "Oh, this internal computer's got such a like a mind of its own, or has its own personality." That's kind of, I think, the idea where that character came from. Was that just kind of line right there?
Oh,
And then they're like, "All right, what if, let's just say it was a droid before that, and it had this kind of weird programming and stuff like that, and we made it like
well,
not
it's
that,
perfect.
yeah,
That's so creative.
yeah,
Think of that. They did that in the original movies, the original trilogy, and they were able to connect that. Just something that they randomly did in those movies to connect back to, really well, what's the word? It really, it's almost like they intentionally did it thinking we're going to eventually do one that's back before this on how like they knew or something. It's
yeah."
crazy.
Yeah, it's stuff like that, or like Rogue One, where they're like, we used one sentence and we made a whole movie about it. It's stuff like that, and it's impressive, and that just shows how much like people love Star Wars, or there's just such an attention to detail where you're like, well, we could still go back and we can build that out to be a bigger deal. Like everything in Star Wars can be a big deal if you kind of give it the attention, which I thought was interesting. Let's see. So we talked about Kessel, all that stuff. I guess the biggest part. I don't want to say that he did a poor job, and I don't remember if they changed out I forget who's going to be the original actor or what they were going to make him look like, but Paul Bettany's in this. People know him probably best
Yep.
as the Vision, and he's kind of the main bad guy for the Crimson Dawn, even though we find out that he's not necessarily the head honcho. I think he's fine. I don't think there's too much, about him that like really. It's funny to think that no matter what big movie he gets in nowadays, they like just put a bunch of paint on him. I was just like, oh, they're probably like, hey, come in here. You want to be this guy? You guys have scars all over his face, and it's like, oh, great. Like it's like it's the Vision stuff all over again. Not to that extent, but I think he's fine. I think the coolest thing about him though is the kind of lead in to the actual main villain, which I remember being shocked in theaters. Again, this spoilers for this whole thing, plot details here. But Joe, were you impressed or surprised at all to see who kind of the big bad behind all of this was?
Yeah, and explain to me how it works in the timeline.
He's alive. That's all I need to know.
Darth Maul, yeah, like they basically said he didn't die when he got chopped in half and thrown down the chute,
Yes, that's
which
more.
I know we know from the animated series, but
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of the last time we've seen him is the Clone Wars and stuff.
yeah, and so at this moment he's back and has the mechanical lower half legs, right?
Yep.
That's what you're to assume. So it's that version of him and this hologram communication.
Yep. So it's actually really interesting because the actor who portrayed him back in Phantom Menace, Ray Park, that stuntman, he's the one who's actually there. But then Sam Witwer, who does his voice for the Clone Wars and was also Starkiller in Force Unleashed, does the voice. So they had Ray Park do the lines, and then Sam Witwer kind of went over it. And unless you're looking really close, you're never going to kind of notice the difference. But it is a little interesting to hear the difference of how his voice has changed, because if you listen to Phantom Menace, Darth Maul gets maybe a couple lines tops, but he sounds a bit different. And Sam Witwer,
master, and
Sam Witwer's like a real, like a voice actor. Like you can hear it. His Darth Maul is very menacing. He's got the laugh and everything. So it's kind of an amalgamation of the two. The question is, and Ray Park's family didn't even know about this. There's kind of this story where he went there. He went to Solo with his family, and then he knew that scene was coming up, so he kind of like looked over at all of them and was like waiting for them, and they were all like freaking out. They're like, "Wait, how? Like, when did you do this?" Which I thought was pretty cool. So it's kind of, I always feel like this is a little like litmus test, or kind of dipping that toe into the water for them to say like, all right, are people still really like jazzed about Darth Maul? Like, if Darth Maul did get like his own real movie, would people see it? I feel like that's still the case. I don't know if that wouldn't ever be the case. I just don't know if you bring Ray Park in to do that and then try to dub him over with Sam Witwer then the whole time. I don't know. What do you think?
Tough part.
Yeah,
that's the tough part. I mean, worthy of something on the big screen again, for sure. I mean, he's just a compelling character. I think the aesthetic really gets people too. He has that screen presence just based on the look.
Yeah.
So people kind of crave that, especially from the dark side, as it were. So, it'd be awesome if they could branch out and do something besides an animated series, but it's kind of tough at this point. And I'm sure we'll. I don't know. I don't know. It's cool. It was neat to see. I guess the questions that unfold from seeing him. I'm like, okay, so this is post him getting chopped in half, dropped on the thing. Things have happened since. Where does he fall in the order of things? He's in command of. He's like the hierarchy of this Crimson Dawn. He's no longer in league with the Emperor at this point.
Yes.
Or he's about. Yeah, he's no longer in league with the Emperor, but he's still a Sith.
Yeah.
All right.
So it gets a little tricky. They're going to probably answer this in the next season of the Clone Wars, which is just premiering as we're recording this. We just had the first one drop the other week. Basically, it goes down like this. If you know Darth Maul from Phantom Menace, you know that he got chopped in half by Obi-Wan. He's probably dead, right? Well, guess what? He wasn't. So in between episodes 2 and 3 of the prequels, we find out that he's alive. He has like these spider legs. He was like on this junk planet or whatnot, surviving. Is found by his brother, Savage Opress. Fun name. But then he gets basically brought back to having like the robot legs thanks to the Night Sisters on Dathomir, which these guys are Zabraks. They're from Dathomir. So it's just magic.
Fixed his mind. He was a little mentally.
Yeah, he was a little crazy.
Up after.
And he probably still is a little bit more so now. Does some stuff, basically takes over the planet of Mandalore, like Mandalorians, for a little bit. And then eventually gets stomped down. Again, spoilers, but it gets stomped down by the Emperor. He's not the Emperor quite yet, but it is Senator Palpatine shows up and basically kills Savage Opress, his brother. And the last time we saw Darth Maul, for my knowledge, at least on screen like this, besides maybe like the comics or books or something, because I'm sure he showed up there, but is getting basically lightning tortured to death by Palpatine, and Palpatine's like, no, I'm not going to kill you. So the question is, what happens between that and then Clone Wars, which I think he's going to pop back up in, and then also after that into this, because this is, a while, maybe a decade or so or more after all that stuff transpires. So obviously Maul has a knack for surviving, I think, just because people love him so much. So they're just like, he lived, don't worry about it. But I would love to see him.
Yeah, it is interesting to wonder.
Yeah, no, I was saying, it is interesting to wonder.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's interesting to wonder what could transpire with his character between where you left off there with the description to this moment now, and what exactly he's doing and how he holds a high spot of power with this faction, the Crimson Dawn and all. But
yeah, he probably runs it right now. And I should say this too, because people probably would correct me out there. Yes, he is in Rebels. He's featured heavily in Rebels, which is, oh my gosh, this is after episode 4, maybe, or right before episode 4. It's right before episode 4, I should say. And we know how Darth Maul's story ends. However, there's a lot of time in between there that is still that's gone dark, and as this movie has proven, you can do a lot with just a couple of years. And they kind of do a time jump where Han has been like in the Imperial Academy for like 3 years, so there's a lot that could have happened there. And he learns to be a pilot, which I kind of wish we could have seen a little bit of that, because he's just like, I'm a great pilot now, and you're like, that would have been kind of cool to see him like learn to pilot a TIE fighter or something. You know what I'm saying? Like,
spoilers abound. Yeah, for sure. But spoilers abound. How does this story end?
Oh, Darth Maul?
Yeah.
Oh, Obi-Wan Kenobi kills him.
In Rebels.
In Rebels, yeah. He cuts him down. It's a for sure kill, too. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it's quick.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like a long, drawn-out fight, but... Yeah, I was going to say, if I don't say that now, people are going to be like, well, we've seen him. Yes, we have. I know we have. But I mean, like, in this time period, which is all just one big time period now. But anyway, yeah, so Darth Maul. Some people maybe feel like he was a little shoehorned in. I guess as a longtime fan, it felt a little bit like that, but I was still stoked. I was excited. It was nice because I didn't expect to get any surprises in this movie, and that was the surprise for me. I was like, oh my God. I was sitting with Levi, and I'm like, dude, no. And, like, if you go back and watch it, they start playing, like, a little bit of Duel of the Fates just quietly. Like, as he shows up, and they like, if you don't know who he is before he ignites the lightsaber, I think it's funny. Like, they're like, all right, we should have him ignite a lightsaber just for like the one person in the crowd who's like, like, is it a Star Wars movie without a lightsaber? Like, I feel like you have to have one lightsaber in every Star Wars movie.
Crazy.
Like, he's like,
yeah, when you think about it, it's like, yeah, that's the only lightsaber you see in this movie, but it's an impactful way to show one off, I guess, and. it kind of leaves you being that that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
First of all, the fact that was it Kara?
Oh,
What's her
Kira.
name? Kira. It's her final like interaction in the movie, besides looking out the window of the yacht on her way out. But her being in league, like still staying committed to the Crimson Dawn, but essentially taking the mantle of I forget his name already because I didn't care too much, but
Oh, you're
Paul
referring.
Bettany's character.
Yes, you're referring to good old everybody's favorite Dryden Voss.
Yeah, like she essentially takes up his mantle after killing him, covers up that it was actually her that did it, but meaning that to some extent she liked her role there, and now that she's able to take that spot in command, I think she was going to stay dedicated to that, or maybe because she knew that Darth Maul would hunt her down and kill her for being a traitor, kind of a thing,
Yep.
something of that nature. So she knew she'd never get away from it or out of it totally without dying.
Yeah.
So she's just going to play it out, but eventually it's going to lead to more. I mean, this is almost like sequel setup. Like they could do another movie immediately after this and kind of show some things happening that could be cool and maybe feature Darth Maul, giving us kind of what we would all hope for after seeing that scene at the end. But yeah, I don't know. It's impactful. Her interacting with him, showing him off and all, and then her just kind of leaving, and Han just kind of, it's weird. There's no dialogue there to kind of show off how they're feeling. You're just supposed to get that Han accepts that it's kind of over and they're on their own. It's weird. It's
For
a little
now,
weird.
that's true, and I think they left it ambiguous
Open-ended.
enough, especially with Beck. It's like, yeah, we go to Tatooine, there's a good job there, and that could lead, they could find a way around it where it just goes right into New Hope, or it could be like, because this is Han's kind of first meeting potentially with Jabba, so he could go there and do the job, and that could be the movie is like he's doing the work for them, and then he's still trying to find Kira, and Kira dies, because it's kind of weird to think that she would still live on in the galaxy, and Han, who like for years was trying to find her, would like find her, it wouldn't work out, and he just kind of give up and then fall in love with Leia. Like I feel like there needs to be kind of some finality. Like
final.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well said.
Thank you.
I agree.
Darth Maul needs to cut her down, is what I'm saying. No, I just want to see Darth Maul. Is it that hard, everybody? Just put him in another movie. Darth Maul would be sweet. I don't need to see Han Solo fight Darth Maul, because I don't think that's going to be a fight that anybody really wins. Like, because like Han couldn't die in it. But yeah, I want to say two other things quick. First off, I like to think that this film, I like the look of it. It's got that dirt, that grime, but it has like kind of a clean sharpness to it. Just the way they like filmed it, it looks nice. It really fits in line with what they did with Rogue One. I think if they made another film around this time period, you could call it just like, I don't know, like the Rogue trilogy, or just like the kind of the Offshot Stories trilogy, because I think it's interesting. Also, I like Lady Proxima in the beginning. I think that's an interesting, fun concept where like all these kind of like kids are kind of like under the protection of her, but she's like this creepy like water worm thing that lives like in this cave, and they all like come bring junk to her. Like I thought that was such a fun idea, and I like early on that like Han's like, I got a thermal detonator, and he's like, and she's like, that's not a thermal detonator, that's a rock. You made a clicking noise with your tongue. And like right there, it kind of shows who Han is, where he's kind of like, this plan will totally work. And then
grasping for survival, and grasping at straws.
And he does it so much. He's like, they're not going to send out like even one TIE fighter for just one little freighter, and then they send out 5. Or he's like, we have 30 armed guns in that freighter right over there, and then just like it takes off, and it just like shows that Han is like, he's like, oh, he's like the cool guy, but it's like, no, he's still. Like this is like his first couple of jobs, or like when he's jumping on the train for the first time, nobody else screams and they just jump on it, but when he does it, he's like, ah, and he jumps like 5 feet and like lands like right on his face, and he's like, I'm okay. Like I like that it's kind of like he's such a greenhorn. Good. Alden Ehrenreich, I'm sorry that I misquoted or misnamed you earlier. You did a good enough job, man. You did, I feel like, the best you could have with this whole situation. Which is funny because there's this kind of, I forget who was originally directing. It was the guys, the Lego movie guys who went off and did Into the Spider-Verse, which people really loved, but then they kind of were creative differences left, and then Ron Howard kind of came in and picked up where they left off. I think it's a solid effort. Joe, what do you think, man? How do you feel about this in comparison to just movies in general, or maybe just Star Wars?
Um, how do I feel about it in general, movie wise? I was entertained. It's fast paced enough. It's not there's no snooze fest here. Edge of your seat, maybe a little bit at certain moments, obviously. I think the casting is well done, and especially considering that they're trying to portray characters that we're so familiar with. Um, and as a Star Wars film, gosh, I almost want to say I like it better than Rogue One, but Rogue One has Darth Vader, so I can't say it. Yeah, but I appreciate it more than Rogue One in a lot of ways. The only thing I like about Rogue One is how it literally it's touching. It's butted up to and touching A New Hope, right?
Yeah.
And I love how it picks up that moment of Darth Vader boarding that ship and everything. Favorite moment of all time when he goes into that tube. Those guys are running away trying to escape, and he's just like, oh, such an intro, such a moment. But really, that's the most standout moment of that film that carries it above Solo for me. But overall, I feel Solo, for me, I feel a better connection, maybe because of the familiarity of the characters, regardless of same actors or not. But yeah, I mean, shall I rate it? Shall I rate it now?
If you want to, you can.
Yeah, let's throw a number on this sucker. I mean, I'm probably giving it a good strong 7.5. I'm always keeping these round numbers. I'm not getting too exact with like 7.23s or anything crazy, but it's somewhere in that 7 range. I think there's no reason to skip it. If you're a Star Wars fan, it's worth watching. I mean, indubitably worth watching. And I really liked it. Like, it's something I could go back and watch again. The CG, like you mentioned, like the explosion, I mean, just the detail, they do a really good job in this film. I love some of the costumes and everything.
Yeah, the Marauders and stuff.
Yeah, the Marauders are really cool. The old-fashioned practical effects I really appreciate, as per Star Wars formula. So I just really like it. I just I'm probably giving it a reserved 7-ish, somewhere in there, because there are other Star Wars movies that I feel more passionately about, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
I can't remember exactly what I rated it, but please watch the review. I did it a while ago, so go check it out if you want. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and it was fun to go back to it. And I found myself, I was sitting here today, and I was like, all right, I'll put it on the background, I'll try to edit at the same time. But I found myself just I watched the whole thing. I couldn't look. I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool scene. Oh, this is kind of a cool
drawn
scene.
in.
Yeah, I got drawn in. I was like, okay, you know what? Solo, I think gets a lot of flack, and it was at a weird time. If people remember, it came out the May after The Last Jedi, and I don't know if it was kind of a combination of people just getting exhausted with how much Star Wars there was, or a lot of people were, yeah, no, this is true, or kind of the divisiveness of The Last Jedi. So it was an unfortunate time for it. I kind of wish they would have pushed it back to December. I think it would have had a better showing, but I still think everybody involved, they did their darndest, and it's a fun Star Wars movie, and like, honestly, this one, it would have been even better in the theaters if you could go back and watch it there, because that's kind of where it's meant to be watched, just like all Star Wars films. So yeah, I'd say watch it. And like I said, it's not on Disney Plus yet that I know of. I could be wrong, I didn't see it there, but I'm sure it will be there soon after the Netflix contract runs out. It's like Infinity War. Or wait, Infinity War, did it come to Disney Plus now? Infinity War was on Netflix for a while, and it was like, it's not there yet, but it's like you can watch Endgame, but you can watch Infinity War. It's kind of weird. It was like, don't you want to watch them like back to back? But yes, yeah, there you go. Well, Joe, thank you for kind of indulging here and kind of talking about this, at work, as you did this time. I appreciate it greatly. And for everybody tuning in, I appreciate it as well. If you guys have a movie you want us to talk about, or a game or something specific, all you need to do is tweet the hashtag Critical Podcast. You can tweet at either of us. You can tweet at me. I'm at JimmyGood013, or you can just tweet at Go Critical as a whole. Joe, if they want to tweet something at you, though, maybe a Darth Vader gif or Kylo Ren gif, I guess that's more of your style.
Yeah, I'm a Kylo Ren kind of guy, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, where do they find you?
That sounded oddly sexual. I apologize.
That's-
Interpret it how you want. They can find me on Twitter at Lever_627. Lever, just like Beaver, only with an L. Thank you very much.
Yes, and this week's hashtag will be hashtag Coaxium, which I believe is spelled Coaxium. I think. I just kind of came up with that. Hashtag Coaxium, which is becoming more and more prevalent in all these movies and like Smuggler's Run and stuff. I was like, oh, steal a coaxium, which we did a pretty good job. It's kind of weird, Joe, thinking about the train in Smuggler's Run and then the train in this movie. It's just like, or just like
I
train
just want more
icing.
sensitivity out of those controls, man.
I know.
And we would have had more.
If you go back, I wish it was a little more sensitive because we were smashing a lot of stuff there. No, it's
We
okay.
did a little bit. Yeah, we were at the wrong elevation. My up-down guy was a little off.
No, if you go back and watch the video, I'm like, go left, and it's smashing into rocks. It's just, you're good. Anybody watch SpongeBob? Anyway, thank you for everybody for tuning in. If you want to support us, we have Patreon, all that jazz as well. But please send us in some questions. I would love some questions, anything, even if it's not Star Wars related. Send us a question, please. I would love just anything. Send us a question. Anyway, we'll be taking a break because next week I will be out of town. Don't worry about it, because I'm sure we'll think of something special for you, just for you, dear listener, dear viewer. Anyway, thank you so much for stopping by, and until next time, just remember to adapt and overcome. Well done, sir.
Not too bad, I hope.